dear viewers. Welcome to yet another episode of the Citizens Chat Show. Today, in discussion, is a very interesting topic. Last week, we saw yet another coup in the Sahel region, where we saw an army or a group of soldiers led by General Tiani overthrow a democratically elected President Bazoum. That coup in Niger is symbolic in that it represents that from the coast to coast, the eastern coast of Africa to the western coast of Africa, in the last 3 years, we have seen conflict in the Sahel belt. We see what's happening in Sudan. We saw Chad last year with the president losing his life, being replaced by his son. We have seen Niger in the last 1 week. We saw what happened in Burkina Faso. We saw what happened in Mali, and finally in Guinea, that is on the Atlantic coast. This begs us the question, why this new wave? And to discuss this topic, I have very capable guests today with several perspectives to give to this topic, not only as it is, but also what it means for Uganda. And allow me to introduce my panelists for today. Starting from the far right is Mr. Joseph Osheno. You're a UPC ideologue and media personality. You're most welcome.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yes. Next to him, I'm really honored to have you, Honorable Augustine Ruzindana, veteran politician. I would really be interested in hearing from you from a historical perspective as well. I believe in your life you've seen very many coups. Yeah.
I haven't been involved in one, but I'm
yes.
The one I was involved in was not a coup.
Yes. I don't know if Major Paula Witch can say the same, but
I've not been involved in coup, but I've been involved in the struggle.
Yes, and we'll be interested also in knowing during the discussion what amounts to a coup and what's a struggle. It's very interesting for the viewers.
Yeah, it is.
Honor Major Paula Witch from National Resistance Movement, where he serves as the Director External Services, and Inch Bentley as the Director for Legal Services as well. You're most welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, and then next to me is Dr. Sarah Birete, Executive Director, Center for Constitutional Governance. You're most welcome.
Thank you, and glad to be back on the show.
I'll start with you, Honorable Augustine. We have had many waves since Africa's independence. We had the 60s coups that took away the likes of Nkrumah, coming up to the 70s where we saw the Obotes removed. The 80s was riddled with coups left and right in both East and West Africa. We saw the likes of Valentin Strasse, very young men taking over power. In Uganda as well, though the semantics will differ, but we saw a couple of coups in 85 and 86. There were those waves. We saw a semblance of stabilization in the 90s, 2000s, but then even the 2010s, except for the Arab Spring, which was another wave. Right now, we see the Sahel, almost a spring across the Sahel. What do you make of it?
Actually, if we can give a background,
Yes.
there have been more coups since the Second World War outside Africa than within Africa. And these things are of many types.
Yes.
Some are like these ones which have taken place recently. And some, like for example, the Tunisian one. There has been a coup in Tunisia by the president overthrowing the constitution and putting in place a new constitutional arrangement and legal arrangement. Virtually, the legal system in Tunisia has been overthrown. A few weeks back, there was an election in Thailand.
Yes.
The winner of the election was unable to form a government and has given up. He has given up because of the system in place.
Couldn't form a coalition?
No, there is a Senate. the election of the prime minister is a combination of the lower house and the Senate. The Senate is unelected. And with the combination of the Senate, they made it impossible for the one who won the elections to form a government. And so there are quite many coups taking place. The background to the Ukraine war is the coup of 2014.
Yes.
An elected president was actually overthrown.
Yes.
And this has been hailed by the West. But it was a coup.
Yes.
It was a coup. And so there have been quite many coups. And then some coups, Sankara is held high in Africa as a revolutionary and so on.
Yes.
But he came through a coup. So did Nasser in Egypt. So a coup is not necessarily something negative. I remember in Mauritania some years back, a coup took place, and the normal condemnation by African Union and ECOWAS and took place, and then they soon retracted and said, actually, this thing was justified, and they accepted what had taken place and so on. So we need always to reflect. We need always to reflect what is the background to this. If you see the background to the Niger one, the person who was president and was just overthrown, at the time he won elections, he had been Minister of Interior. And among the people whom he defeated was a previous president within the country. Now, in the systems that have evolved from the French system, there are no electoral commissions. It is the Ministry of Interior under whom elections are organized.
Yes.
And those who are a little older here, even when we used to have an electoral commission, it was the DCs who would select the officials at the polling station and so on. So they were actually in charge of the elections at the polling station and counting and tallying and so on. And in these places, you must reflect when an immediate former minister of the interior is the winner. And in his winning, his party does not have a majority in parliament. No, he doesn't have a majority in parliament. He won on the second ballot.
Yes.
And that's when he got to 54%. So what actually is the underlying thing within that place? When they say democracy, what is the democracy there? And then when you look at what is happening, who are those who have rushed to impose sanctions? Nigeria. ECOWAS means Nigeria.
Yes,
when
yes.
the military aspect means Nigeria.
The
ECOWAS. Now, the incumbent, the president that has just been elected, there is still a challenge in court.
Yes.
And one of the issues about his ineligibility as a candidate is that in the United States, he was fined $600,000 for suspicion of drug trafficking and so on.
Yes.
Now, this proof, the people who are in court actually do not have, because there was no judgment. It was a settlement of court, and they cannot access the actual. So the U.S. has this fellow by the neck, and he's the one rushing to impose sanctions and.
So do you think it's a diversion or is it collecting leverage?
No, the thing is, how do the people feel inside?
Yes.
The ones who have jumped to condemn him are virtually external.
Yes.
And the immediate ones, I'm just giving Nigeria. Chad hasn't. Actually, the president went there. The president of Chad.
Yes.
Algeria has come up and said, if anybody attacks here, we are going to defend them.
Yes.
Algeria.
Yes.
With Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea.
Yes.
They are now 4 countries.
Algeria and Algeria has a border with Nigeria and so on. So some of these things,
So ECOWAS has collapsed.
you look at them. Is this an anti-imperialist coup, or is it a coup against the interest of the people of Nigeria?
Yeah.
These are some of the. It is too early to know.
Yes.
But the people who have jumped up, I said, we are imposing this and so on. And the young leader said, export of uranium stopped.
Ibrahim.
Export of uranium to
Yes.
France. Export of uranium to the US stopped. And then the imposition of. Now, what the former president whom was he working for? If these things are in the interest of democracy, just at the same time as the coup in Senegal, the opposition party has been banned. Internet in Senegal. You know the young man who was arrested and charges. Even the party now has been banned. And the party was banned at the same time with the closure of access to internet. So that now if you are there is no one talked about Senegal democracy and so on. So the issue of coups, you've got to look at them objectively and say, is this something that we need to condemn?
Yes.
And of course, when you see it is the internal people equivalent to the SFC, the people who know, it is a Paris school.
Yes.
It is really a Paris school. But the others, the army, and the people who attacked the French embassy were not army.
Yes.
It was ordinary citizens. So there is a need for us to not to parrot what the media in the West comes up with, but to go. Nowadays, the social media gives you a lot of information about whatever happens, and we form our own views about. Then there is the complex thing of Sudan, for example, which you also mentioned. Sudan is a complex society, but the power structure is not so complex. The power structure since independence has been based in Khartoum and Omdurman. The others are outsiders. The reason Garang project of a united Sudan failed was because it was impossible to bring into the power structure something like the SPLM into the Omdurman Khartoum setup. And that's why this fellow of Darfur, the structure that was formed by Bashir, and so on, it is an outsider. This is a vice chairman, but the vice chairman is not the vice chairman at all. And eventually, even if they may have other grievances which may be genuine, they cannot be part of the power structure within the Sudan.
Yes.
So don't be surprised if no peace initiative is successful.
Yes.
Having another, and we have South Sudan now. We could have
Yes.
West Sudan.
Yeah.
There are people. There is the SPLA North.
Yeah.
The neighboring states to South Sudan. They are Muslims. Why don't they become acceptable within the power structure? They are still in armed struggle, and so on. So some of they are talking of the Wagner Group and so on. No, the Wagner Group is a recent thing. Sudan, the Sudan has had a mature political class for a very long time. The communist part of Sudan was very powerful for a very long time. And the reason you saw when they organized the civil disobedience, it is organized, not destructive at all. People come, they go, come and go. It's an organized, but that is within Khartoum and Omdurman. And so the others feel outsiders.
Yes.
And now these outsiders are armed.
Yes.
So there is quite a problem.
Yes.
The other countries of Burkina Faso and so on. Burkina Faso, one of the most prominent historians in Africa, Kizerbo,
Yes.
is from Burkina Faso.
Yes.
Very, very well known as an authority and so on. So they are not, the people don't just jump. No. There is a lot of work done by the elite and so on.
Yes.
And so don't jump on these coups and condemn them necessarily. Otherwise, you would condemn Sankara, you would condemn Nasser.
Yeah.
Even the Saddams, the way they started, they were not they established a secular society. Now with the destruction of the secular society in Iraq, they have gone to the sectarian Shia Sunni type of thing. So you are, if you are analytical, you have to become a lot more.
Yeah.
Now within here, the NRM in 1986 was not a coup. The coup was in 85.
Yes.
It's the one which overthrew Obote. The struggle had been going on in the for mean period and matured during the 85, 86.
Yes.
And that one is not a coup. The gestation period of an armed struggle actually is a long campaign. It is a long campaign, and eventually the program is known, and so on. And that was why it was much easier to form the broad-based government in 1986. DP couldn't claim that it was their turn now that the UPC had been overthrown, even if they had assumed they had won in 1980. Their term had expired by the time. By the time. So I wish to clarify that our role in 96 was not a coup.
Yeah.
Our takeover, our assuming power.
That's really funny.
I hope
I don't think
we have a cordial relationship, but on that one, the coup was an intra UPC one in 85.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Honorable. And I would like to bring in Mr. Osheno. But then before that, I really appreciate that. I think many times we tend to get what we see. I mean, get what to say from social media, but many people don't know that a lot of times it's about the people and the palace or the court
Look at what happened
politics.
in Tunisia.
Yes.
It's a coup, but the president remained.
Yes. Yes. I think that's really insightful. Mr. Sheno, similarly, what do you make of this wave of coups in the Sahel region, especially comparative to all the other waves that we have had?
Yeah, it's very interesting, and got a bit of a throat, and that's why I decided to overthrow the traditional occupier of this seat, who happens to be a contemporary entire school young man compared to Mzee Augustine, and so because Mzee Augustine is here as an elder and an authority, the young man couldn't quarrel, so he conceded. Yeah. So order is good. So order is senior. Order is good. But that said, I just want to put a quick disclaimer on the question of coups. I happen to, because of course I should have an interest, but in a very important way. Yeah. That yes, 1986 is debatable, but 1985, as far as we are concerned in UPC, was a coup, yes, but it was not an intra-UPC coup. For the purposes of historians, we believe that NRA was involved in that coup. We believe that DP was involved in that coup, and we believe that other forces were involved in that coup, and so were some dissenting voices in UPC using the army. So that's extremely important.
The cause beat, yes.
Yeah, so that is the thing. So now coming to 1986, I could be cheeky to say that it was also a coup within a coup, considering the fact that these were now partners.
But Honorable said, and quite rightfully, that your term had expired.
No, DPs. And here I'm giving my context of opinion. So, yes, but you know, he was being DP. But no, but so he's right generally. Yeah. But as I said, I could be cheeky and then say, well, it was a coup within a coup, because these were partners who fell apart and failed to galvanize the arrangement from 1985. In fact, Mzee Ruzindana, I was preparing to go to Makerere, in July, and I was worried that the coup guys would ensure that I never taste Makerere, like some people might look forward to tasting Miri and entire school, because these are great schools. Yeah. But so I was there that Saturday, and I listened to the raid announcements and how Honorable Yoweri Museveni was being requested to report to Kampala immediately. And so those of us as young students were puzzled what exactly is going on. So that happened. So then coming to the fact that these guys could not settle their own internal disputes, obviously, yes. Again, as Mzee tells the world, they had been part of the organized struggles from certainly the early 70s. Museveni normally talk about 66, which is neither here nor there. Yes. In his A level, and yes, by 1985, 86, they were at a different kind of stage, and the outcome was that. But so that's that. I happen to be fundamentally a pluralist. I met Mr. Museveni for the first time in Mwiri in 1980, and so did I meet Semogere, so did I meet Dr. Botti. 1979 war against Idi Amin was very traumatizing for us then young students. And the bombardments in Jinja, particularly the bomb that hit the post office. Yes. That's personally. Yes. On the Mwiri Hill, you see these big thumping explosions, and then you see fire. I mean, smoke and all this kind of stuff. Yes. And possibly an unexploded bomb on Lake Victoria. And we're seated by the terrace. This guy likes to boast about his school. I must boast. Mir is a very fine school. But sitting on the hill, and then you observe, you see Kampala, Kakira, and everywhere else.
This is
1979.
All right.
It was extremely traumatic for us. So we're saying now we're young students, but we didn't like Amin. Amin was a dictator. So Amin leaves, and then 80 elections comes in. So the political leaders are coming. So for us as students, we're very much already tuned to the idea that we hate dictatorships, and we like democracy. Yes. And so that's how we met these leaders, and I formed my very early political opinion then. Not only was I looking for all of hope for returning to pluralist multi-party polity, but also seeking our leaders. And so that is then. That, in a way, cemented my convictionist view about pluralist polity against militarism. Yes. And I can say it was extremely traumatic for me, seeing what I saw, and we're saying that Amin must go, political parties must come, and elected governments must take place. And one of the things I did was, once the UPC won the 1980 elections, which we're all convinced today that UPC won and DP lost, one of the reasons why I was fundamentally opposed to NRM was because I was convinced UPs won the elections. And if I look back to what happened to in the meantime and the experiences we had, we didn't want to return to militarism in any form. So that really formed my strong opinion, not only against NRM, but generally against the military dictatorships. Fast forward, I found myself in exile and I campaigned massively for return to multipartyism in Uganda. But while I was doing that, Sarah, I got involved in Africanist, pluralist campaigns, the books, and many of these other things.
Yes.
Fast forward to where I am now, because I'll cut the story short. I'm sort of conflicted as they talk. The other day, when the conversations were taking place about who's who, including this very powerful video doing the rounds by a Nigerian politician, talk about what's the coup? What about guys who break their constitutions? What about people who whip their citizens in the streets? And what about then the underlying causes?
Yes.
Also I'm a writer, and in my column in the New African magazine, I celebrated, I sort of boasted, I must pull back my pride. I thought over the last 20 years that Africa had crossed the threshold of militarism and we're generally going competitive multipartyism, and that we're not going to go back to coups. The only thing that was concerning me was military guys who now dump military uniforms and put on suits. And my hope then was that we're going to reach a stage in which we're able to stabilize our societies, stabilize our communities, stabilize our quality, so that there's a genuine competitive multi-party elections. It would appear that while many of these guys put themselves on suits and started now being much more terrorizing leaders, not only the people, the constitutions, the economies, the communities, than sometimes even the colonialists. Side by side with that, we must now ask ourselves, which have been some of the underlying grievances. We don't even talk about imperialists. If you look at some of these nation states, it is very clearly the case that something has happened in this continent. We badly, urgently need leadership. Muziri Ndana and I were talking here before we came on air, and we're having conversations about leaders, of how people emerge, politically, and we're having conversations about contemporaries at schools and universities. And I'm wondering where the leaders that are going to take over from them today on the continent, where African leaders, where African university students, where African young students in tertiary school, are they genuinely there having serious conversations about about our polity, about our ideological commitments, our views on, say, an apartheid. Apartheid is still very real. You see kind of the conversation taking place today in South Africa. Then about the new threat about coups along the Sahel and the post-Arabs being realities. No, it happens to be the case that something has happened in the last 20 years where there's been a genuine deficit of democracy, a genuine deficit of provision for our people. And I've argued more recently that perhaps one of the things that's happening is a reawakening of a post-neoliberalism polity, where the population are beginning to say, hang on a second, this structured adjustment program really did not work for me. States possibly sold our resources, but we don't see the outcome. Now, quickly then, to conclude this bit, go to the Sahel. I was asking myself the other day, in Niger, these guys provide the powerhouse for Europe, powerhouse for France. But what have they got to show for the ordinary Nigerian people? Finally, a video that did the rounds about a Nigerian minister, I don't know whether I can confirm it. I was telling a young mentee of mine, this young guy is putting on, the minister is putting on such a powerful shirt. I'm not being jealous here. Because you can see, these are things which are handmade, and they're extremely expensive. The guy is crying, and they're asking him, allegedly, you must show where the money, for public money, where you face consequences. But I'm saying, what is it happening with the post-independence, post-colonial, and in fact, post-your liberationist agenda, politics, leadership, in the last few years?
Do you think we're getting towards post-pluralist? Because it seems like, it seems people, you campaigned for that wave, and rightfully so at the time, for pluralist governments. But we see, many African countries accepting this system or taking on this system, but the reality of the people not changing. So it's more like, sort of dictatorial tendencies or levels of service delivery to the citizenship, but with elections every 5 years.
I think that's part of my worry, and that's why I gave the introduction that I did, that we actually, we are at a risk that the campaigns, in this case, particular Sarah and I are involved with the backing of the elders and support with the elders like Sudan,
Yes.
are at threat that very soon maybe we might begin finding difficulties, persuading young guys in the streets what is the need for us, and then so when you look at these countries, I say, if countries that produce gold, for me, just to have a kilogram of gold, will turn around my life and yours. I'm sure quite a few people in this place,
Yes.
But these countries produce tons of gold, and they remain the poorest on the continent. Something is wrong. In part, that's part of what Mzee was trying to say in nuances, that we need to be looking at the underlying. Meaning, I'm agreeing with him that, look, somehow, you're beginning to say that, well, ironically, maybe go around a bit. Sankara, I said, was the first military person who took over power that I personally respected post Nasser, Abdel Nasser. But based again, as Mzee was saying, that if you took over, and then came in to deliver for the people in a particularly revolutionary way, people say, possibly at least here the end justifies the means. But now we have Democrats, allegedly, including possibly genuine Democrats where there's no contestation, and then in coming to deliver, which would others be delivering for the people, they don't. It's possibly not surprising that these guys are coming. But of course, at the end of the day, just to conclude, it's very clear that, well, we talk about the Warner groups, there's a new realignment of nation states, the interest from Anglo-America, the interest from Russia and China, and many of these people. They're coming. My concern, very quickly to conclude, is that I'm not quite sure whether we are really, really ready that they're actually new contemporary African leaders, including those ones occupying the AU headquarters, who now have the genuine mandate and moral authority to actually advance, push direction. No wonder these military guys are telling ECOWAS, you come in, you'll find us here. And maybe the people are willingly going to say that, well, we're going to fight on the side of these guys. And it will be a very difficult one for me to take one side 100%.
Yes, thank you very much. And over to you, Dr. Sarah. How should we view this, this Sahel spring that we see? A lot of people keep telling us how to think about it. There's the Wagner issue, there's the multipolar world, giving esteem or to some of these groups to come and take over office. But what's the African perspective to all of this? And how can we move forward? Because it appears we're at a level where we need to rethink, how we approach democracy, pluralism, because it's very real and also possible in Uganda. So how as a young African or as an African, should we view what are the things that we should pick from the spring that has happened in the Sahel?
Okay, I wish to start, but with the words of the great political philosopher, John Locke.
Yes.
John Locke defined 3 natural rights.
Yes.
The first right is a right to life, liberty, and property.
Yes.
The second natural right is in the purpose of government to protect the natural rights.
Yes.
Life, liberty, and property. And the third right is if government does not protect life, liberty, and property, then the people have a right to revolution or rebellion.
With the people.
And that defines the philosophy of a revolution or rebellion. And what Honorable Zindana was saying, when do you, or the question before us today is, when do you blame the coup? If the government of the day has failed or has gone against the basic interests of the people, of safety, of security, of survival, of social harmony, then how do you condemn the people who are trying to liberate themselves? Or the politics of a coup versus liberation. So, but why are we stuck in this mirage as Africa?
Yes.
In the post-independence talk, the leaders used to say that Africa takes 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards.
Yes.
But I think now we take 1 step forward and 5 steps backwards. Because at times it is it defeats somebody's logic to understand why we cannot have accountable governance on the continent. And that's the gist of the matter. Many people are beginning to say, maybe this democracy is too much for us to comprehend. That multi-party politics is wrong or something, and Africa is not ripe to take on. And I find fault with that. Because I think we cannot, it's like we cannot start finding justification for our retarded growth in terms of self-governance and development. And then we look for somewhere to hide, saying this democracy is too big for us. I am not yet defeated to that corner. I still think that Africa can still get proper leaders who are accountable to the people.
Yes.
If you look at our traditional governance systems, especially parts that had chiefdoms, they had accountable governance.
Yes.
They had accountable governance. Even ability to quickly develop consensus as to which clan should offer leadership. So this thing of saying that we are failing the ABC of elections, we are failing the ABC of social development, we are failing the ABC of accountability. Why? Why? So if you compare with I want to look at the recent development in Russia and the US.
Yes.
The insurrection at the Capitol Hill, the January 6th.
Yes.
And then the Wagner, concept in Russia. The Capitol Hill for me in the US.
Yes.
was both bad and good. Bad to the extent that it dashed hopes for people who were looking up to America in terms of democracy. It's even this can happen in the US, and I know Trump is running and is in the lead for the Republican ticket.
Yes.
50% with a big margin.
Big margin.
And at times, as a governance actor, at times because we think that an active citizenry then is able to propel accountable leadership. A citizen with the best knowledge and economic empowerment. So when you see this rise of, extremism in the US, maybe these are challenges that we need to solve as leaders in our small spaces. But the good thing was that insurrection brought out the need for efficient institutions.
Yes.
I think it has been proven that with the proper institutions, a country can contain any madman in power.
So that was proof of the America's
the American insurrection.
Yeah.
Because the Congress, the Senate, the courts, including judges, single-handedly appointed by Trump, are calling him to account.
Including his vice president.
Yes.
In that saga.
And the vice president stood up to him and said no. But now you have the courts, including the conservative judges, indicting him. For me, this is victory for institutions in democracy and a big lesson to the world.
Yes.
If you go to the Wagner element in Russia, I think for me it's a warning for dictators, following even the conduct of the rapid support forces in Sudan. I want to combine the Wagner effect with the rapid support forces.
But Bogozin also tried, there was an allegation last month that he also tried to march on Moscow.
Yes. But who is Wagner? Wagner is a Putin creation.
Yes.
As a mercenary unit. The same applies to the rapid support forces of Bashir and the confusion they are causing in Sudan. And what lessons do we pick from Uganda? We have SFC and all these kinds of multiple agencies that can easily, on a flip, turn into a Wagner or the rapid support forces. For me, that's another lesson that these people, like the Bible says, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And almost Putin died by his own sword. He survived narrowly. So for me, those are my two lessons. When it comes, if I get back to the continent and what is happening in West Africa, really, and the South and West Africa, the three elements that are basics for any country to develop. Active citizens, rule of law, with equality before the law, and institutions
Yes.
Once we have these three, then we can contain not only men in power, but also fools in power. Because democracy has two flips. You can have an extremely aggressive person in power, or you can have a fool in power. So how do you prepare that period when they are holding the tools of power?
Yes.
You need institutions to check their excesses or inefficiencies.
Yes.
You need the people to hold them accountable, and you need the law to apply to everybody equally.
Yes.
This is what has eluded Africa.
Wow. Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah. And Major Paula Awich. I want you to give your perspective on the Sahel Spring that we are seeing in terms of coups, but also speaking to what Honorable Augustine said earlier on the legitimacy of a conflict. You were involved in one yourself, and I think it would give some practical light on what forms a legitimate struggle as well. I mean, from your perspective, and how can we differentiate it from illegitimate struggles? Yeah.
I'll remind me to come to that one last.
Yes.
So that I don't forget it. But let me first express my happiness, as usual, to be in this panel with Sarah from Waranyanje, our wife, and the congressman, but more especially today with the senior old boy.
Yes.
Of the great school. OBM, I wish to tell you that there was a time when Kategaya was chairman of the old boys. And he was so busy, he was the first deputy prime minister. So I was the one doing the running. So at one function, I brought a list of inviting old boys. And I think I was looking at it from the lenses of the active old boys in government. So for some reason, omitted your name and Sir Richard Kaizuka. But then, of course, you are known in FDC and Richard. So Kategaya looked at the list. He said, what list? Is this a list of old boys? I don't see Ruzindana and Richard. Is it because you think they're in FDC? Go and write another list. Tare School is not a political party. It's a school. If you're calling old boys, in fact, he told me, go to Kampala Club, you'll get them there. Go now. I had to take off from Kategaya's office to run and look for where to serve the invitation. And I did it.
Why had you looked them?
I said I was looking at it from the lenses of those active in government. So I was writing, I was writing from my head. I would say so and so in which ministry. This one is in which ministry. This one is. So I forgot you and Sir Richard. The guy looked at me.
No, you omitted them from your lenses.
I said, what are you talking about?
It's extremely courageous.
But the guy said, as long as I don't see the name of Ruzindana and Richard, please, this is not an entire school list. And that shows you the history of which we come through the school with a non-partisan nature and individual merit. And of course, you have seen the submission from the senior old boys. I was feeling like listening to him over and over again. I almost told you that give my minutes to the senior OB.
Yeah.
So that is how much I am happy and I treasure, and I end that and that. Now, I like to say, first of all, the coup, because you seem to have clearly not, a coup by definition is, of course, an usurped taking over government by force, and it could be by military or non-military. Yes. Now, in the Ugandan context, we have had clear coups in 1971. You could equally say the overthrow of Binaisa was also a coup, where the military commission overthrew Binaisa and installed another government. You could also go back and say the pigeon-hole constitution, where Bote brought in a new constitution and overthrew the system and became a president, from prime minister to president, is also a coup. But that is a question of debate, but clearly there are coups which took place in Uganda. Now this brings us to the concept of the other, a protracted people's struggle, or a protracted struggle, like the case of NRA. This is a struggle that does not take over power all of a sudden as a coup does. So this is a protracted struggle which takes over a period of time, and as the senior OB says, it takes time to give his views, his philosophy, to amass a big population, so that by the time the taking of the power is the last item. Yes. Not the last, the middle item, because later on you have the challenge of governing the country anyway. Yes. So there's a difference between a protracted people's struggle, a protracted struggle, and a coup. So that is it. Now, That is the differences. Now, the causes, like you have to see in the African context, some people have argued that a cause is both internal and external.
Yes.
Like and that is where the debate we are finding it, that sometimes you find a coup is caused by internal factors, in that there is indeed either omission or commission by the existing government.
Yes.
That is part of the causes. But also some causes are external. Like the case of 71 in Uganda was so external in the fact that the Israelis had issues with Obote over South Sudan, but also they moved to the left.
Yes.
Where Obote had moved to the left, and the capital wall felt that this was moving towards socialism.
Yes.
So you find that factors are both internal and external. Now, but if you look at the current situation, it almost manifests that checking clearly the governments that are in place, like Niger is a country with cobalt and gold and very rich, but is almost ranked the poorest countries in the world. And that is also a cause for concern. So one would factor it as an internal cause. And of course, the other external cause is that the presence of the French and their exploitative tendency also attracts foreign other interest, because all other foreign interests are also interested in the same material.
Yes.
But also remember that for the independence of Africa, it's so ironical that Soviet Union or Russia supported the liberation together with America.
Yes.
I think that is the second time I've seen Soviet Union and America on the same pace. The second time was, or the first time was fighting Hitler.
Yes.
When they were fighting Hitler, Russia and USA came together on the allied forces.
Yes, yes.
Together. But also in our independence. Why in our independence? In our independence, America was also had emerged as an economic force, and they were rivaling the European capital.
Yes.
So it was to the interest of America that these Africans get their independence. Let them get their independence, so that you cut off the British colonial supply, the French supply, and all that. And at the same time, the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution in Soviet Union had ushered in the workers in power. So it was the workers' government, and of course the workers' general philosophy was to support the freeing of the occupied areas, the colonized. So for the first time you find them there. So in the same way, therefore, the French foreign interest or other interest in that country is bound to attract other foreign interest.
Yes.
So you can't rule that out also.
Yes.
Now, I had told you to remind me about the legitimacy.
Yes, legitimacy.
As I define coup, the legitimacy is that, did you know that if you overthrow a government now by coup in the morning, and in the evening they try to overthrow you, you will charge this one of treason? Because those who argue the constitutional law theory believe that once you have succeeded in establishing a government, whether by hook or crook, you are the legitimate government. The immediate person overthrowing you is committing treason. So the legitimacy, in this case, apart from the constitutional and the legal doctrine, you may say the legitimacy is in the condition on the ground where the people oppress, where the what. But I also want to draw your attention to the legal legitimacy.
Yes.
That somebody just quickly legitimizes himself. It's not enough to say, hey, come on, in the morning you came through coup. Why don't you want me to overthrow you?
Yes.
That now doesn't happen. So that is it. But I like to say this. The military, like we have it in NRM or NRA, I like calling it. It is about the growth and the organic structure of the army, the ideological clarity. In our army, which I grew up through as a baby, is that we have, first of all, the commissariat, which is a very organized and a clean system within the army. In fact, if you got the political commissars of the army in a meeting, you'd think it is a group of an opposition people in the army. Why? Because, first of all, their tools of analysis is developed by concrete reading of difficult literature, including dialectical material, historical, political economy. Their tools of analysis is developed.
Yes.
And they are taught to be objective to the extent that they are supposed to cross-check the transgressions within the army. And that is why when you look at NRA and its growth, do a research on all the songs that were sung in NRA, right from Luero. None of them had tribal element. It was actually propagating nationalism, at that small time. So the organic nature of the army protects you against these issues of coup. It is an army which looks at it in nationally. And again, outside the army, the conditions of the ground, the government in power should try to address it. In Uganda, Article 1 of the Constitution, in a way, theoretically legitimizes coup. How does it legitimize coup? Article 1 says power belongs to the people.
Yes.
And there's also an article in the Constitution which says if somebody is acting contrary to the Constitution, you have a right. Article 3, you should overthrow it. Yeah. So, meaning that the government is left bare in the hands of the people. What saves you? And I've said it here, that how comes that in Kenya, people will take the advantage of Article 1 and go to the street and not in Uganda? It's not because NRM has aeroplanes and helicopters and tanks. No,
and
it is the meeting of the aspirations of the people. It's the only weapon. It's the only. Otherwise, you don't go. You can't oppress the people. I can assure you. You don't rely on the tanks, on the what. So, what really saves you is the meeting of the aspirations of the people. And that is why you will see it in other places and not in other places.
Yes.
Otherwise, Article 1 and Article 3 basically makes the country so vulnerable constitutionally.
Yes, thank you very much. And in legitimacy of law, of course, legitimate cause coupled with legitimate methods. I remember the president in one of his speeches, drawing a dichotomy between Lakwena and Kony and how they were very different, in cause and methods. Yeah, but I think that has been a very interesting first segment, and thank you very much for
when you were talking about Tunisia.
Yes.
I remember the time when I went out of parliament.
Yes.
I trotted around Africa talking to members of parliament.
Yes.
About the Aror and so on. We had created an organization called African Parliamentarians Network Against Corruption, and I was chair in Africa.
Yes, yes.
So when I went out of parliament, that organ became enabled me to meet lots of parliamentarians. So we had organized a conference for Central and West Africa in Chad, in Jamena. And we were inviting members of our organization and also telling them to be gender sensitive.
Yes.
The members in Niger wrote back and said, it is not possible for us to be gender sensitive because there is only one woman MP, and that woman MP is not our member. So now, if you have a democratic system that does not include women, you really wonder how much of democracy that system is.
Yes.
Or how much of democratic that system is.
Yeah.
It amused me when they were talking of restoring a democratically elected president and so on. A system that does not cater for women.
For women.
A system in which their currency is still controlled in France. The CFA franc. You see, here before we had the Uganda shilling, Kenya shilling, there was there was the East African Currency Board, which was issuing the currency within this. There is something similar in that region.
Yes.
And it is controlled in France.
Yes.
And they pay a fee for the France managing their currency and so on.
Yes.
So when young people like you, I imagine those ones who have taken over could be like your age group. They say, but how independent are we? There are bases of France and America. Now they are talking of the Wagner coming in. If France has bases there and America has bases there,
Yes.
why shouldn't there be a Wagner one?
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
another one.
Yeah.
So you cannot. The pain of other people can't be projected in you. But you
Yes.
can imagine how painful
Yeah.
people see these things daily.
Yes.
And so they come up and somebody says, you are violating democracy. Which democracy is there?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Honorable Augustine. And that will launch us into the second segment where we'll be discussing the issue of agenda setting and whether the international community, as long as it sets the agenda, do these coups still mean anything? And then we'll also look at how the coup affects, what is in it for Uganda's case? What do we learn and what should the citizenry pick and act on? Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our first segment. Stay with us on the Citizen Chat Show.
The Citizens Chat Room happens every Friday at 2 p.m. on Civic Space TV Online on Facebook and YouTube. We invite you to be part of this conversation. Civic Space TV, freedom always.
Yes, welcome back to a second segment of the Citizen Chat Show. Today we are discussing, African geopolitics in the light of the recent coup that happened in Niger, but also scoping wider into the last 3 years, where we've seen a coast-to-coast conflict zone developing in the Sahel region. The first segment, my dear, very capable panelists broke down several issues, and we would like to start off from where we stopped, which is the issue of agenda setting. And Mr. Sheno, I would like to give you an opportunity to expound further on something you had started in the beginning, but also something that he concluded with, which is if we don't set the agenda anyway, it's like the continent is on a constant state of capture. Of course, it has been unipolar, the US and the West, but now we have China, we have Russia. Do the coups mean anything? Because we see in some cases, I think it was Burkina Faso, there was a coup after coup. So do these coups really mean anything? And even in cases where we have seen armed struggles, in the semantics of our colleagues, we still see that the citizenry is not fundamentally changed in terms of if you look at the Global Human Development Index, Africa is still ranking low. So do these coups mean much in that context?
That's why I said as part of my concluding remarks at the introductory segment that I am confused for the first time. And as I said, while I was traumatized in 1979, I'm actually feeling rather confused and traumatized now. And the risks are that our elder generation, I don't know what goes into their minds, particularly those ones who've been steadfast leaders like Mr. Augustine. My generation should be gearing and leading you guys in a much more constructive, objective, and in a very apparent way,
yes,
based on our own track records,
yes,
where we can quite clearly say that we have been unwavering on many of these. At the moment, I don't see it anywhere on the African continent. The point is, I don't know which country. In the early parts of the 90s or thereabout, Senegal were amongst the few 3, 4, 5 nations that we refer to. Mr. Augustine told you of how right now the guy who got rid of President Wade, who was Wade, actually let's pronounce his name,
yes,
who was a strong man who was not moving. Macky Sall came, we thought he was a breath of fresh air. We did so because as African activists particularly,
yes,
we wanted to use sample examples where Sarah and I can say, we told you it can work here, we told you so.
Yeah.
And now, what is it? Is it what disease is it on this continent?
Yeah.
In an amazing way, I'll go back to some of our contemporary founding parents. notwithstanding some of the challenges with the coups that came against them, most of them, as Comrade Wich said, unfortunately, were coups which were engineered externally. We may have to look back and actually say that our founding parents, the Nkrumahs, the Botes, the shortcomings that the West helped perfect and found the younger people of the Comrade Wich generation buying into as the bad guys. When we look back, we suddenly realize that actually these guys came with energy. These guys came with focus. These guys genuinely seem to want to have Africa, own Africa, and grow Africa in a new direction away from the colonial masters, colonial powers. But the colonial powers couldn't allow them. So the ideological differences that was quite categorical at the time did not help. You were either friend with the East or the West. And in fact, at that time, I could have walked into embassies in Moscow and got rid of these NRA guys in the 90s, as simple as that, because they were going to give me all the necessary backing. But it was no longer the case with the Cold War, at the end of the Cold War in 1989, for Berlin Wall. My hope was that was an opportunity for Africa to claim back itself and take back ownership. Now that Africa was not the, if you like, the battlefield for the Cold War. Our leadership post-independence were victims, predominantly, not all of them, that all of them were perfect, which was suggesting 1966-67 constitution, which of course I don't agree. If you say 1966-67 was a coup, then how many coups has Museveni subjected himself to break up the constitution and abusing them in a rather crude way, including taking tanks to there? But we don't want to go there. We simply say some of the challenges these leaders then found, that they needed to dismantle in order to regrow new nation states. Don't technically exist today. Today is very fairly straightforward. One, we just want leaders who are conscious, ideologically conscious, focused, driven to a purpose, and that these leaders in a world in which there is China, a world in which there is Russia, a world in which there is European Union, you can put it now this way, and a world in which there's America, you can actually say that there is sufficient spaces for us to look for partners in particular areas, and then to genuinely grow our continent. What is lacking right now is the leadership. And I am not trying to ask myself, I actually genuinely don't know what I can put finger on as the cause. I think there's a genuine complacency in the last 20 years that while, as I said at the beginning, I'm sorry to bore you on this, while I think we got excited that post-Cold War, there's a new emergence of multipartism and pluralism. That multipartism and pluralism, as Mzee Augustine was saying, was going to automatically result into provisions for our people in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of genuine independence, killing of corruption. Mzee Augustine, for the record, is the first Inspector General of Government. He came into at the time, I believe, to make sure that you check not only corruption, but you make sure that government resources, public resources are mobilized for the peoples. I don't want to subject him to that, but that's for the record. That is his early position at the time. What happened? It's really not he's no longer part of government in that sense. You can't subject him to him. But if you look what's happening in this country, the amount of resources which is being used and abused in a very open way. If it were the case that the ordinary citizens under Article 3 could have their ways, there would be coups and revolutions in the streets of Kampala every week. Maybe that's one of the reasons why Mr. Museveni makes it almost impossible for Article 1 to apply. So if you then map that onto even much more relatively weaker states in the Sahel, which were traditionally really not substantially built and mobilized and organized structurally, then it's not surprising that people are at the weakest point. But Mr. Augustine referred to something again on the Sudan. Something we've had conversations about. It's extremely unfortunate. The Sudan is one of those traditional countries that had very early organized, ideologically driven, very organized political parties, and very, very conscious citizenry, including today, I think outside Uganda, I have many more Sudanese doctor friends who are women than any other countries in the region, and they are around somewhere. And these guys cannot have the opportunity to translate their skills, both political and professional, onto one which serves the majority of the people in Sudan. Many of these now end up in exile. So if that you pick that Sudan. Now, Sudan actually along that line would that possibly the most organized, possibly the most powerful.
Sure.
But of course, historically, we have all these other countries from independence, they had emergent leaders. What has happened? I genuinely don't know. I genuinely hope that as the impasse seems to build between ECOWAS and the military organizations, interesting, I hadn't actually heard about Algeria coming in to take a position.
Yes.
Now that has happened, it will be very interesting, the direction we take with the European Union, the one group of Russia and the Americans, how really this problem is solved. It's very likely that if we're not surprised, that the base of these guys might expand and turn not only into a group of military leaders, but a group of revolutionary military leaders. And if they invoke the people power element in those sub-regions, and they invoke the Africanist power element, these things will gain attraction, because if you go online, there are very, very, very few people who are, in terms of sampling, there are very few people who are actually opposed to what's happening there. As I said, on the one hand, as a traditional multi-party Democrat is worrying, but on the other is telling you basically the cows come back to roost, as Sarah was saying, onto the failure of leadership on the continent. So it's a bit worrying for me.
But then could it be the storm before the calm? Because clearly we have a changing political economy situation in the world, like with all these new centers of hegemony coming up. But at the same time, we are seeing people like Ibrahim Traore saying, okay, we're not going to give uranium or these other minerals to France. So maybe could it be a moment of renegotiation, but of African interests, but with more benevolent leaders coming in?
It's what I was trying to say, that it may be from a military element, it might be nuanced account, a revolutionary element. And earlier we talked about this thing about the death of neoliberalism, which I hope it dies, because I'm fundamentally opposed to it. And that if that happens, then maybe it might be a way out. But it's interesting that the link to Islamists, which the US will always talk about, and including the justified reason for them having their bases, when in reality their bases really actually is about the power and the material resource and exploitation of African control, rather than that, is rather cheeky on them, isn't it? Because 30, 40 years ago, conversation about these Islamist things, it was when we were fighting, particularly up to including for the liberation struggles in Southern Africa. The conversation was about the Muslim community on the continent, and particularly in this case in the Middle East, who were marginalized. But marginalized by who? Marginalized by Israel and their allies. Marginalized particularly centering around the Palestinian question, which is, by, again, nuance to the reason why we had Idi Amin and the coup. So so-called early part of terrorism, the early part of terrorism was basically Islam, but it was very basically about an unresolved Israel-Palestinian question. And even as we talk today, the West is, the global media is hardly reporting about how Palestinians are losing land and how Israeli soldiers go ahead and break communities and kill children, and people are watching. And Sarah hinted, the radical right in America thinks Obama Jesus is the one killing Palestinian children. But I know Mr. Jesus, because Mr. Jesus, I do him. I know what Jesus would say, on whatever is happening in Palestine. Jesus would not be siding with these guys. So in a way, solving the Arab-Israeli conflict as an issue, then the emergence of some of the Sahel thing that we talked about, which is really traced back to the failures of Iraq, the failures of Syria, the failures of a quest for oil, and now the dying power of America with the emergence of China. I think people are regrouping themselves. The problem is, as I said, Africa is again becoming a battleground for this, and in the absence of that, there are leaders. Quickly, I hope political leaders, political parties like UPC are able to have opportunity to have a sense of clarity amongst themselves. I hope we're able to begin to have, again, political parties in Uganda and across this region, political parties, with a conscious ideological routings and a conscious awareness on many of these issues, and perhaps beginning to work together, but also working together in such a manner that we also engage the civil populace, including some of these guys in the military, to make sure we're able to check them. Because at the end of the day, I believe long-term polity must be politically guided, whether the power is military or otherwise.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And I remember in law school when Sylvia Tamale would explaining dynamics that were paradoxical. She would say it's like a kaleidoscope that has been shaken but has not yet settled. I think that is a lot of what we are seeing at political economy and geopolitical level. But then I would like to move to you, Dr. Sarah. Do you think Uganda is on the right path? I mean, we have Sudan, Sahel. Then we have our neighbors, Kenya, who are progressing now through many transitions. We have Zambia, which managed to transition as well. Do you think we are, according to the markers you see in our governance, do you think we are moving towards, the Sahel side, or we are moving towards our more progressive colleagues?
That's a question for Sarah.
Yes, I know. Before I come to that, let me pick on the issue of, coups, as a funder, which you were saying.
Yeah.
That when you establish a new government order, in law it's on the Carlson theory. And the purpose is that the law must be consistent. So when you establish a new government order,
yes,
either through force of arms or uprising, you must make sure you remove the old order,
yes,
with a legal instrument.
Yes.
When you people captured power, remember legal notes number 1.
Yeah.
Which is now hard to access. But I recently landed on the detail. We ran the legal notes number 1 in law, but see the real detail of it and the components that were later challenged by Sempewa.
Yes.
So I now have the copy. So when even Article 3, if you take over power using unconstitutional means, the Constitution, the 1995 Constitution allows people to do whatever it takes to restore the constitutional order. So that's why you must quickly move, either with an instrument, say you are suspending the constitution or otherwise, just for the benefit of the viewers out there. So on your question of where Uganda is moving, I would still mark it under the 3 indicators. The indicator of rule of law. If you look at our judiciary, look at our institutions, governance institutions, they are much weaker than they were in 1990. This government, the glory days of Museveni's government, were from 89, when he had stabilized, to 94. 95 enactment of the constitution. You can take it up to 99.
Yes.
Those are the days I would define as the glory days under President Museveni. Beyond that, we started on a declining curve. It's now almost deep in the hole. It's been on the consistent decline since 2001. And that has had a big toll on institutions in this country under the state capture, which is now like at 100%. And if you want to understand the definition of state capture, just to look at the delegation of the trip in Serbia, it was like a holiday for members of First Family. So in the pictures, you have Odrek and the wife, you have President Museveni and Mhozi and a few in-laws that joined him on the front row. All of it was just family.
Backed by a babysitter.
Yes. The only mixture was, the Minister of State for International Relations.
Yeah, Mhozi's babysitter.
Who is also family.
Yes, who is also not far from the family. So when you look at that, and the joke on social media was that Uganda Connect that they opened was far much better looking than the embassy in the same country. So maybe they should shift the embassy to also take some rooms in the Uganda Connect. That defines for you the state capture in this country, the collapse of institutions. We now make a budget for individuals. My friend Odrek has 10 trillion, 10 billion in the budget. As an individual, who is he? What agency is he? What instrument establishes him? We have now reached the level of budgeting money for individuals, even when we cannot budget for interns. We cannot budget for medical interns, but we budget for Audrey Krabog. Interns needed far less money, but they are not a priority. So you need to see people on honeymoon in Serbia, and really. So in this country now, institutions are just a mere name.
Yes.
You can look at the judiciary, the bedrock of rule of law in this country. I know they are very independent, credible men on the bench.
Yes.
But
Women?
Some women.
yeah. But there is also a mixture of cadre judges. There is a mixture of cadre magistrates. We had roving magistrates during elections. A magistrate in Kasangati broking message. They shift them, sit on Uganda Road, continue to broke messages. Sit where continue. No jurisdiction. So, you look at the Electoral Commission, they launched the roadmap because democracy must be based on free and fair, credible elections. They launched the roadmap yesterday. Have they given accountability on the missing elections, in the last elections? So if they have no capacity to build confidence between the mess in the last elections, and now you are on here say, nomination days are up, organize themselves for a coup and drama that we see in this house, in this country. Have you addressed the shortfalls in the previous elections? I think that should have been a starting ground. If they were a credible institution, you can now go back to look at Parliament. I know Parliament does a few things and they are honorable members in actual sense of being honorable. But we also have a bunch of crowns in that house. And sometimes you don't even know why a taxpayer spends money on that huge house that most of the time can't make sense, can't connect to the wishes and aspirations of the people. So this is now on that aspect.
Yeah.
We can look at active citizenry. Who is in charge of conducting civic education in this country? Article 4 of the Constitution is very clear. The state and state institutions must popularize the Constitution and translate it in local languages. Have you ever seen? You are a lawyer. Have you ever seen translated copies of the Constitution? It is now 28 years since enactment.
Is it that old?
Yes.
Older than you, young man.
Not operationalized.
It's older than me.
Yes.
Yes.
How many Ugandans know the Constitution?
Yes.
Or even why is it applied beyond the class, the constitutional class and other legal used for legal education? Where is the applicability of the Constitution? We only refer to it for convenience. If you are up to some mischief, then you say, let me check by the way. But at conception, it is not the issue that comes to your mind to say, by the way, ABC is this. We check it to justify the mischief in the country. Which is looking at me. That's the practice in government.
Yes, I'm looking
We
at
don't
you.
look at it as an original basis, grand norm in the pure theory of law under Hans Kelsen. But we come to it to justify the mischief that we are doing.
But Dr. Sarah, Major Paul in the first segment made it clear that you cannot oppress people into following a government. That all you're saying is not cumulative enough, like to, for example, have the Ugandans.
No, I can understand Awichi. I can understand Awichi from the point of view, and I will quote one Kenyan politician. The name has skipped my mind. He said, the regime is not going to reform itself out of power. That is, for me, the point through which I understand NRM. NRM cannot reform itself out of power. They are the architects of state capture. They are the beneficiaries. Don't expect them to reform themselves out. It is up to the other people to reform things and conduct of NRM. And if that means they leave power, then they must leave. But for them, they cannot do it. And I don't expect it from them. And I don't demand it neither. I demand it from the people.
But the people are not
There is no government that can reform itself or regime that can reform itself out of power. I don't expect that from NRM. No. We must demand it, and it must come as a popular demand of the people. It cannot come as a wish of NRM. That they know today, if they held free and fair credible elections, as demanded by Article 1 of the Constitution, they will be out of power. So what do you expect them to do? Launch a roadmap without even accountability in the rest direction? Can you give us a recap? Where we rest with you, Mr. Justice Biawakam? How did we conclude? Can you start from there?
Yes.
They cannot do it because for them they are beneficiary of the injustice.
Yes.
So then the element on the citizen again goes on the knowledge. How many people know their rights? And when you look at the clampdown, the kind of context, the civic and political space, the political parties, you can see the chaos in this way. The NGOs, this way. These are agencies other than the government, which for 28 years cannot take the constitution to the people. Then you destroy the citizens' mobilization agencies. Political parties are agencies for citizens' participation in governance. Civic organizations are agencies for citizens' participation. Then you must destabilize them because that's what keeps you in power. If I'm seated in the chair over which. But where I am seated, then we must demand, we must work, we must reform the regime because it cannot reform itself.
But then something small, in terms of going back to the context of the coup, we have an NRM, NRA, which has, in many senses, stabilized. We have had a stable and stronger state being built over the last 36 years or 37 years. And maybe that's why, it's important because we see weaker states in the Sahel, having all these conflicts. And they always say when the two elephants fight, it's the grass that is hard. So what do you say about that?
We have failed to build the three elements I've talked about. And we only need true leadership to build them. Because if you have selfish leadership, they cannot give us the three elements that prepare governance.
Yes.
Because they will not benefit. If, for example, you want to be a life president like President Bazoum, even when the constitution, save for a few articles that were really not progressive, like especially Article 269 on political parties, if President Bazoum did not have ambitions of ruling for life, the constitution would have ushered in the three elements. It is very clear. But because he wanted to rule for life, then he could not reform the systems to get himself out.
Yes.
So we need a selfless leader who must give a country these three foundations for democracy.
Yes.
So that's the deficit that we see in the countries in the West. And I want to conclude just briefly why the people act the way they are when coups happen, the celebration and the jubilation. I know that even Ugandans celebrated when it overthrew. But the people out of they think that this is a new messiah. That look towards the men in uniform as liberators, as messiahs, not knowing that so long as they don't give you the three foundations, then you don't have a nation through which to base for socio-economic development.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'd like to bring Major Paula to reply, but also I want to focus the topic a bit because we are talking about the risk of this instability and coups. And Dr. Saras mentions the decline in institutionalism in Uganda. But at the same time, where we see, for example, different types of, we see the grooming of the SFC into now almost the third or fourth brigade within the army. And then a couple of weeks we had...
It's an alternative army.
We had the discussion here about the private military company under NEC and such aspects. Wanted you to also, respond to that, but also generally reply to what you say.
Whether they can reform themselves out of power.
You see, Sarah kept asking me, Sarah kept saying I was looking at her.
Uh-huh.
And I was indeed looking at her. Basically, because,
you'd expect, yes?
basically because you allowed Sarah to set her own question and answer it. Initially, your question was which agenda now do we set?
No, but I
But you
did.
left
Where
her
are
to
we
set her
in
own
terms of
second time,
performance?
I tried to repivot, but then she'd repivot. So
You see-
it was.
you
So
see-
you're conceding.
You
What
see,
a
that's the thing.
No, that's Mr.
Sarah's
Moderator.
question,
You
that's
asked
it.
me
Yours-
where are we in terms of progress, and I
Yes.
explained using the
Yes.
3 elements of democracy.
You set your own question and properly answered it. And your question was, how best can you curse NRM? That was your question. How best can you curse NRM?
Yeah.
I think we better have a day and readjust that question to
Yes.
NRM's achievements vis-a-vis what you think has not achieved.
Yes.
Then we would have a whole day for that. But you have chosen, instead of discussing achievement vis-a-vis
That is absolutely
failure,
fine. So
you
long
have
as I'm
chosen
the, so long as I'm in the
set
panel,
your
that's
own
absolutely
question,
fine.
how to pass NRM, and that was your question, which you ably answered. And so desperately that you actually said all arms are dead. You went to the executive and you talked about Moscow trip, notwithstanding that J.J. Odongo was there, Okello Oryem was there, and all others were there. You also talked about parliament that you said is in not dysfunctional. You are saying even the judiciary. So you really made a lot of curses. But I would like to say that the agenda is, if I may answer the agenda as you had asked,
Yes.
is that, as I said earlier, it is the needs of the people. I have already said that the constitution in a way makes government vulnerable. And let no government deceive itself that it is in power because of the power of the state, the power of the military, the helicopter and the tanks you have. It's because if you are there, then you have addressed the needs of the people. And that is what we say in NRM. Recently we had a SEC meeting and Museveni was saying, you're not going to make campaign of, oh yeah. Your campaign should be on how much have you identified the needs of the people and addressed it. Are you really talking of people's welfare, economic welfare? And that is why, by coincidence, that several attempts, by the way, have been made to raise an insurrection in Uganda. Several times. You know for a fact that Dr. Besigye had said for him is not now going for election. Besigye said for him he was going to take the what? But nobody has gone that direction. Nobody. Is it because the NRM went to a witch doctor?
Yeah.
Is it because NRM had tanks?
Sometimes I wonder.
No, because you meet the needs of the people. That is the first thing. The agenda should be every government should strive to meet the needs of the people. Otherwise, no amount of going to the witch doctor to silence the people will work. No amount of having tongues will work. And that's why Museveni is saying, please don't go for campaign of oh yeah. Meet the needs. We try through various interventions, whether PDM, whether what, we try through various interventions.
Just to direct the conversation. The very first submission by Honorable Ruzindana, he mentioned that there are different types of coups. And one of them is what they call palace coups. Now, what I asked, especially to do with the rise of alternative military, I'm picking his semantics, but for the point, alternative military brigades like the SFC, doesn't that become like one of the early markers for situations like Sudan or these other places?
No, I had heard about the Sudan case. I decided to let it pass.
Yeah.
You see, the case of Sudan is not the SFC type. Sudan, what happened? The nearest you can compare, Sudan was UPDF and Haro Group. What Bashir did was, during the war, he developed an independent body like Haro Group to fight. But he made them so strong in terms of number and logistics and conflict. Can you imagine an Haro Group attacking UPDF? That is what it was. And yet in our case, we say the Haro Group, you are fighting the rebellion. But they are subject to code of conduct of UPDF. the court marshals, the political commissars, the intelligence, the commanders. So the Sudan case is not the state like the SFC. The Sudan case was Bashir established an Arab group to fight the rebellion. And then he made them conflict with the government army because he thought if you left the government army alone, it would overthrow him. Yeah. Little did he know that it would turn against him. So the Sudan case is not the SFC, which is for the president.
If I'm to echo,
okay, so get it like that. And they would attack army barracks. Can you imagine? For a long time.
If I'm to echo public sentiment, I could say some public sentiment that within Uganda's context, there is the army, and that is for general state protection, and then there's the SFC that is for regime protection. Or would you assure Ugandans that is not the case?
It's not for regime protection. SFC developed right from the Bush time with the Akanga Byarwanga as the commanding officer.
Yes.
Until Entebbe State House when Akanga was the CEO. Originally it was a section. A section is 11 people.
Yes.
Meant to protect the chairman high command, which was Museveni. Okay? A chairman high command would be going for a mission, say to address a population. No, there was also political work being done. Or even to visit another unit. So this section was meant to escort and protect the chairman high command. It transitioned to Entebbe to what was called PPU. Okay? Yes. Presidential Protection Unit. Yes. Meant to protect the president. And of course, by extension, the first family. So this is the unit. Now, at some places, it has been used to protect institutions because of the manpower issue in the army. But this is an army meant for protection of the presidency. During your regime, the Obote was called PEO. It was called Presidential Escort Unit.
Precisely.
Check it. It is called PEO.
I know.
So all presidents around the world have. So it is not
7,000 members. Did it?
Yeah, it was a unit. And
but even if you did not, what was the population of Uganda at that time?
No.
It was a 10-15. So, structures develop. No, structures develop according to situation.
Mr. Moderator, some information.
Yes, please.
SFC is for protection of the president.
Yes.
It is an evolution of Presidential Guard Brigade.
Precisely, yes.
PGB.
Yes.
So you cannot
PPU,
compare.
PPU,
yes, you cannot compare the number 42 million. They are not going out to protect 42 million.
No.
They are protecting the president. Why do they even have their own headquarters, their own budget?
And I make clear the import of the population. The import of the population, I'm saying, is that everything goes in a proportional rate. Even the number of teachers, the teachers in primary, do you still say that the primary school teacher now is the same number of the primary school teachers then?
Yes.
I'm saying all services grow up in a proportional representation. Even the doctors which would serve Uganda in 1960 or 70, it's not the same number of doctors that serve. So all institutional structures grow up in a proportional rate.
But if I may guide you on this SFC element.
Yes.
SFC under the law and organizationally is part of UPDF.
It is.
It has a specific assignment. Like you can have any other unit having a specific assignment. So organizationally under the law, it is part of the army. And you've seen the officers from there becoming officers in other units.
Yes.
And so on.
Yes.
So it's just a question of the role. It's not the organizational bit. Organizationally, there is no confusion.
Yes.
It is part of the UPDF. It is under governed by the same law.
Yes.
It has got some specific assignment.
Yeah.
You may quarrel with the size and expansion of the role and so on. But It is governed by.
Thank you very much. And it's just that issue is very important because public sentiment is important. What the public perceives may be different from
the sentiment may be because of the perception. But when you are in this type of forum, they really should be guided by what is the law, what is its structure within the PDF and so on.
Thank you.
I'd
like to give you a chance.
Just a minute. What is their special assignment? What is the assignment of SFC?
No, their special assignment is the presidency and
VIPs, exception, yes.
VIPs and so on.
Yeah.
And most countries actually do have them.
Yes.
Now, in some structures, they assume a disproportionate role, like you had under Saddam Hussein, for example.
Yes, yes.
There was the presidential guard, and it was a huge army on its own and so on. But here, it is much more of perception. I don't think it has, for example, developed to the Saddam one.
Yes.
Where the presidential
It's almost.
The presidential guard was a rival of the national army. But here you find army commanders have come from SFC and other commanders, unit commander, and also from other units crossing over and so on.
Yes.
I think it's not really a major issue in the national setup.
Yeah.
What would be a major issue is the percentage of the budget going to defense. That is quite a major issue. It is a major issue in America too. The percentage of the budget going to defense. The issue of accountability of the funds that go to for that role. I happened to have been chair Public Accounts Committee.
Yes.
When we set up a method of auditing classified expense. It wasn't being audited. Before that, we set up a method with the agreement of the authorities then, and these things are there. It's not only it's part of the security element generally. It's not only within the army. There are the security agencies as well, and so on. But that is. He was still on the floor.
Yes, I wanted you to conclude so that we have him. Our time is
I thought we were being.
But thank you so much.
I think we were being sidetracked.
That's it. Basically, that is it. But I wanted to reply to the question of the agenda in that one already mentioned meeting the needs of the people. Yes. There's no magic about it. If you meet or commit to the contrary, then you have no magic about it. Meet the needs of the people.
Yes.
The second thing is, of course, now the development of the state. You have said the Sahel, they have weak states and all that. You should, because why do you need a strong state? Because there will always be elements. Even if you hold a democratic election, somebody will always still be agitating that it wasn't democratic. I was cheated.
Yes.
I was what? Or even foreign interest. Because you are against the exploitation of your country, foreign interest can still come against you, like they were the case in 71. So you have a need for a development of a strong state. There was, I don't want to mention names, but I know a situation when Obote was overthrown. A very senior army officer was in Tanzania, ran to Tanzania, and Obote went with him with another hobby, Major Olila. Olila was a high jumper in Ontario School. You must know, remember him. So Olila went with Obote, with this senior officer, to Nyerere, to brief Nyerere about how Amin was unpopular. This officer, naive as he was, he was saying in Swahili, it means you what panataka mean. Alitoa government na tank hii. That Amin was so unpopular that he took over government with one tank. So Nyerere was like, my friend about it. You mean you are so unpopular that somebody just walks away with a tank on the street? To the naive officer, he thought he was mentioning the unpopularity of Amin. But to Nyerere's ideological consciousness, you mean you have such a weak state that even one soldier moves on the street with one tank and overthrows you? So I'm saying, on top of meeting the needs of the people that I said, we also need a strong state.
Yes.
And that is why I was saying, even within the military, you need an ideologically clear army with a strong commissariat, with political commissars who see the transgressions in the army. They see the corruption in the army and stamp it. They see the human rights violation in the army and stamp it. With a strong human rights department like UPDF, there's a strong human rights department in the army. I'm sure Sarah must have met them. So you need a strong state because either you're going to have foreign powers to mess up, or you're even going to have people who, because we never can be satisfied. So to me, I would propose many, but the agenda is one, meet the needs of the people.
Yes.
Two, build a strong, accountable state system, including, of course, the courts that you said, but the state in a totality.
Yes. Thank you very much. And over to you, Honorable.
Well, I am sure, I'm not
just
sure.
to wrap up everything.
I am not sure how to address the things that have come up.
Yes.
You see, you were talking about the agenda, but many things have come up.
Yes, please.
Let me start with some of the things that have been mentioned.
Yes.
The legal framework, the constitutional framework do exist. And if you just are an academic, they are commendable. The problem is the application and the implementation. They do exist. The rule of law, the rule of law entails, among other things, that the law must be known and it must be certain at any particular time. And it must be applied equally on every, that's the general principle of it.
Yes.
Now, the being known is not for ordinary persons like all of us here, but the application equally. That's where the problem lies. And the people have talked about jubilation when the governments get overthrown. Government for an ordinary person in the village actually does not go beyond LC3. The government in Kampala is not their business. And the government to which they are subjected, regimes is quite harsh and arbitrary. The reason you see them jubilating, they are not jubilating about the pharaohs in Kampala. It is they hope the local pharaohs are changing. That's why in countries like this, you can say two contradictory statements, that there is too much government and also too little government. If you are on the road and you are falling in the top potholes, you look for government, it's not there. If you go to the standards of schools in the villages and so on, you will look for government and it's not there. If you go for health services, you look for government and it's not there and so on. But at the end of the day, the thing I wanted to address with regard to agenda.
Yes.
With regard to the agenda, the basic thing that must be addressed, not only in this country, but in Africa, and which is largely missing,
yes,
is the welfare of the people. It is the welfare of the people.
Yes.
the UPC got one thing right ideologically, and it is the element of social justice. It is the element, the now what is missing among you people, the young ones.
Yes.
There is something which we old people use it to call political consciousness. And among you, you look at the discussions you have on social media and so on, and it's quite low. It's quite low. So if you want to trace that element of social justice, for example, you will find difficulty in knowing what it is. But what would be the element of social justice? In this country now, we have a an adequate critical mass of educated people. We do not have an adequate mass of skilled people. That's why there is a contradiction between us, all of us, even if you are not in the government. You are actually, for ordinary people, you can't be in a suit and you are not part of the system. You have not evolved a system that is satisfying the elements of the welfare of the people. So you will find now we are about 50 million, and people talk about lack of market. Well, how can there be a lack of market in 50 million people? The lack of market is reflected in one statistic. The statistic where 80 people of the population are in the rural area and they are contributing 20% of GDP or less. That means that's what they are sharing. That's where the poverty aspect is.
Purchasing power.
Until you change that equation, there is no buying power in the country. So you go looking for, we produce very little milk, for example. You are looking for market for it outside. It is produced in the local area, in the rural areas, no market for it. All lorries are carrying matoke to Kampala. No local market in the village. The chicken on top of buses from where they are coming to Kampala. You are the people with the appetite for chicken. How come the people in the rural areas have no appetite for chicken? and so on.
Yes.
So in the agenda setting, we have got to deal with that issue. How come ASEAN, let's not talk even about China, are dealing with that element? What have they done? They have done a number of things. They have dealt with the level of education and skills. That's what they have addressed. Don't talk about their politics, whether the multi-party is working or not. They have addressed the education and the skills. They are addressing the rural incomes. They are attempting to bring these manual tractors here. They can't have market. But these manual pushed tractors which are being pushed are actually helping other people to move. They are helping other people to move. This thing of circle, the circles, it was something developed in Bangladesh.
The village bank.
Actually, the fellow was got a Nobel Peace Prize. Although he was politically persecuted eventually in Bangladesh, but he that's where the thing started from. And where did it start from? From the urban areas, the small people making chapati, the other ones who make
the low income earners in urban areas.
The expensive watch, the
Rolex.
That's where the capital for the Rolex and then the concept has spread and so on. When it comes here, you are always complaining about the interest rates of the banks. The interest rates of the banks are not the most oppressive one. The interest rates of the circle, an interest rate of a circle of 3% per month is considered low. That is 36 per
year.
Per year. It is nowhere in a bank. 5% is considered low. The circles compare their interest to the interest of money lenders. No, not to. And the circle concept is very good. But the aspect of how it goes to the people and how it is helping capitalize the rural areas is not considered at depth. You people, your culture is a consumption culture. You enjoy yourself too much. Look at India. India, 30% saving is considered low. China is 45. The whole ASEAN, the savings rate is quite high. Japan.
But Honorable, doesn't the saving culture go hand in hand with the social services?
No, not necessarily. No.
The savings, our time is fast spent.
Okay, the savings culture gives other people money to use. And you as a family, you've seen when, if I may use this word, Indian, when they are here, you find 3 generations in one house. The grandparents and the parents and the children, they have always done that. Even if you see the very richest, like the Madhvanis, they still live as a family and so on. But you people, your stars are chameleon. You have seen one now who might lead the country and so and so on. There is need to reevaluate our values, and that's where that's now organization politically. We also need to look elsewhere. If you look at Japan, the Liberal Democratic Party has been in power since 1955 with small punctuation marks. Even in America, most presidents since 1900 have been Republicans. And the ideology of small government, even now, everybody follows it. Yeah. Now, in our African setting, it's not just the Ugandan one. We have not evolved an ideological framework that guides us. Even when we are talking here, we are talking of multi-party. And the multi-party we are talking about is American, is British. The American thing is not multi-party. They are all financed by the same financiers. Sometimes they move this way. And it's in Europe where parties used to be. Parties have members. The American parties have no membership. And so on. So
just you could conclude because
let me conclude by saying that at a national level we normally propagate a national dialogue.
Yes.
But at the intellectual level, you young people,
yes,
have study groups that develop your understanding of society. Lots of you don't understand how this society works. And sometimes it becomes very difficult engaging with you people because we are talking at cross purposes.
Yes.
And so later there isn't enough time. Let us first understand, analyze the situation facing us, outline the tasks to deal with this situation, and we don't. And generally we don't. And that's why there is confusion.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much, Honorable. And to our dear viewers, it's a very hard task to stop words of wisdom coming towards you, but I believe it has been an enriching discussion we have had today. We started from a very wide point, discussing the Sahel's, the spring of conflict and coups in the Sahel region, but it has gone on to bring out different cross-cutting issues around governance and our collective future as Ugandans. Thank you very much. Until next time on the Citizen Chat Show.